Hey, this is Wolfman Jack, and the following program was brought to you by Tiger Media Network. Ow! And that program is It Came from the DVD collection. Ow!
Hello and welcome to the podcast. My name is John Billinger, and this is...
I'm Connor Keating.
Yes, and today we are talking about... The Blob! Beware of the blob, it creeps and leaps and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And we're also talking about The Blob. Specifically, we're talking about the 1958 Blob movie and the 1988 Blob movie. Right, Connor?
Yep, this is the first time we're talking about two movies in one video, I believe.
And might be the last.
And probably the last time.
Yeah. Well, I always wanted to do The Thing.
Yeah. I don't know if we got time, though. But
The Thing from... Well, maybe we could do that in December. That could be our Christmas movie.
Christmas movie.
Because it's set in the snow.
Yeah.
Both movies are set in the snow. Anyway, The Blob is... Like, the 1958 Blob is one of the most iconic of the 1950s creature features. And The Blob, its remake, is... probably one of the most underrated
I was about to say, like...
monster films of the 1980s.
You got a lot of 80s remakes and stuff, like
The
Thing and The Fly, but those films
Fly.
are like, everybody knows them, but like barely anybody has seen 80s Blob.
Yeah, and I mean, nowadays, I mean, it's kind of the reverse situation for The Blob, for the Thing and The Fly.
Yeah, where
Like-
nobody's seen the 50s version. I don't even think I've seen the 50s The Fly.
Anyway, so I don't know where you really want to start with this. This is a new thing.
Yeah, since we're doing two, we
But-
should probably start off with our history of these films.
Yeah, like general history or our history.
Our
with them.
history, probably.
Well, you know, I always heard about The Blob, and I think I saw it when I was 11 years old, and it scared me. I'm talking about the original 1958 Blob movie. It scared me because I could just imagine this small, creepy, crawly thing crawling around my house and eating me. It was very traumatic for a young kid. I remember there was this other kid at school, me and him would talk about it. And, it was just a fun 50s monster movie. You know, what can you say? And we're talking about 1958 Blob, and this one starred Steve McQueen and a cast of exciting young people. That's literally what the trailer said. When it came to the people came to who this movie was starring, it was just like, starring Steve McQueen and a cast of exciting young people that we couldn't be bothered to mention.
Yeah, and it's like most of them didn't go on to appear in much else.
Yeah, except for Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
Which it's pretty funny that this is his, like, first movie. I'm going to take off my jacket. So, Connor, you can talk about your history with the Blob.
Right. Well,
58 Blob.
It's a lot less exciting. It's just like it's a movie I've always known about. We saw it on Amazon Prime a few years back and said, "All right, let's watch it." And then I bought the Blu-ray from Criterion, and I still haven't watched it.
Connor is not a big fan of 58 Blob.
I'm not a big fan of 50 Blob.
Why is that, Connor?
Well, I think we were talking about it during when we were watching the movie, right? And how this movie and the Giant Gila Monster are pretty much the exact same movie, but with a different monster. And I saw the Giant Gila Monster when I was really young. You saw the Blob when you were young. And so it's kind of, I think, just a reverse situation where, you know, since then we've both seen so many 50s monster movies that the other movie is just boring.
Because Gila Monster's very boring.
You hate Gila Monster. I'm a big Gila Monster fan. Big giant Gila Monster head.
Shaking my head in disappointment. I mean, both movies were actually made for drive-in specifically, like just to make a quick, cheap movie for the drive-in theaters.
They're, you know, teenage protagonists, cars, monster.
Of course, Gila Monster does have a wannabe rock and roll guy.
Yeah, and then this has
Steve McQueen. The king of cool, you know. But yeah, I always liked it, you know, when I was a kid. But Connor did not like it.
I wouldn't say that I don't like The Blob. It's just that I think it's a very run-of-the-mill 50s monster movie, and a lot of people like say, "Oh, it's so unique. It's got such a unique monster," and it's like the H-Man came out like a few months prior, and it's got the exact same monster except cooler.
Sure.
We're gonna force
anyway,
you to watch the H-Man someday. All right.
yeah, now we can get to 1988's The Blob. Now, when I was a kid, the 58 Blob scared me too much that I didn't want to see the 88 Blob. I was like, nope, I don't want to see this movie ever. So I never watched it as a kid, and I only just first watched it for the first time like last week. So Connor, take it away.
A very similar story where I think it's a movie where like I learned about it on like YouTube, and then the Blu-ray was at like probably Best Buy or something. It was the 4K, and I'm like, all right, I'll buy that, and so I bought it, and then I watched it and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, didn't you think that the 88 Blob was better than the...
Yeah, I do kind of prefer the 80s Blob
Kind of.
film
You were basically
substantially.
just like... Well, come on, dude. 58 Blob is peak. That's what Connor always says whenever we watch a subpar movie. He's like, this movie is peak.
This movie's peak.
Girl vs. Monster is peak. So, I guess we should first talk about the plots of both Blobs. Well, we'll have Connor just summarize them both. I mean, they're both kind of the similar story, but they do have differences, which is very fascinating. So,
well, like the general plot is that thing falls from the sky, old hobo sort of guy goes out, pokes it with a stick, gets it on his hand. High schoolers find this guy, take him to the hospital. He disappears. Strange blob monster. The kids are trying to tell the police that there's a monster. The police don't believe him. The monster then goes on a rampage, and they've got to figure out how to stop it. And that's pretty much the gist of both movies.
Yes, but there are big differences, and one of the big differences is the origin for the Blob. In the 58 one, the Blob is an alien. Like, it just crashes on a meteor from space.
Monster.
Yeah, just a space monster. 88 Blob, though, completely different backstory. It was like it came from a government lab. Like, they wanted to launch this thing on the Soviet Union, but they wanted to test it out on a small town America. Which you think, they should test it out on the Soviet Union. I mean, technically, Hiroshima was a bomb test.
They should test it on either tropical islands in the Pacific or test them on Nevada.
Yeah, where they tested everything else. Come on. Then it could be downwind from a cowboy movie.
Yeah.
So one second, let me find the outline pod. And then there's also the characters they're also different in both movies. And take it away, Connor, again.
Well, kind of the thing about the 80s Blob is that it takes the original, the Blob, and then it tries to subvert it at almost every single level. So in the beginning, you don't know that the Blob is a government experiment. They play it as if it's a space monster, just like the original. There's this this very Steve McQueen sort of guy who you think is going to be
jock.
You think he's going to be our protagonist, right? He's the nicer of the two jocks because there's another, kind of rude, crude jock that dies. But yeah, you think this nicer guy is going to be your protagonist. Nope, he dies. And so then
horribly.
And then so we get this sort of troublemaking biker guy who's got a little bit of a soft side who becomes our protagonist. And then the girl who is with the guy that died.
Who's basically the final girl of this movie.
She's the final girl trying to figure out what the heck's going on. And so they have to work together. I'm trying to think of what other specific ways does this film subvert the original.
Sheriff dies in the 88 one.
It's not.
Well, we also get government intervention.
There's
because if in reality, if a UFO or meteor crashed, the government would be there immediately. That doesn't happen in the original. In 88 Blob, we see government come in, but they're not in there because if it's a meteorite, they're there because. It's a test. Sort of thing.
Because they're trying to figure out what happened to this thing, and so suddenly that's kind of the big one of the big switch ups is the fact that kind of the second half of the film you have two threats. You have the Blob, and then you also have these shifty government agents that we quickly learn are up to no good.
They're up to no good.
At first they play it off it's this
germ.
No, they do play it up as an actual space monster. They're like, it's from space. We're trying to deal with this thing. And they're like do government officials come running every time a meteor crashes? Because meteor crashes...
Well, I mean, if you ask conspiracy theorists...
Because meteor crashes, they're relatively common. Like, more common than one might think. And so then they managed to figure out, like, okay, these guys made this, and, yeah, they want to keep people from finding out about this thing, so they're probably up to no good.
Yeah. And then the original, he also had scenes with racing.
Yeah.
Which you thought were kind of boring.
Yeah, well...
Which, let me just say...
Well,
the original film can be pretty slow, I should mention.
There's only one race scene, and it's alright. It's just like them racing backwards, and then they get caught by the police.
Yeah, I mean, well, back to what I said, though. The original can be slow at times, but the remake is a lot faster.
Yeah, the remake's a lot faster pace. And that's kind of the thing is, like, I think it has much stronger characters, so even when we do get those slower moments, like, where we've got the main guy and the main girl, like, in that, diner shop, talking about, like, what the heck they just saw. You've got stuff like that, so you do have those slower moments. Though, granted, they are, like, swiftly followed up by a guy getting sucked down a drainage.
Well, we probably shouldn't spoil it for those who haven't seen it. Just to move on to it, the effects in both movies. Let's just talk about the effects because the original Blob, it's really low budget. It's a crudely animated blob, but I think it's effects in the original Blob have charm.
No, it's not bad at all. I'm trying to think if there was like any. There might be like the occasional bad blue screen or something,
or matte painting thing.
Yeah, but I can't remember like any specific. Yeah, there's like that painting of it over the diner, but it's a cool shot. It looks cool, but yeah, that's even though I'm not a original Blob fan, that's one area where I'll be like, yeah, no, the effects are overall solid.
Yeah, I mean they're fun effects. The remake, on the other hand,
yeah, it
doesn't fuck around.
Some pretty impressive effects,
and I'm gonna censor that, by the way. But it really does not fuck around. The remake is like, the effects are like on par with The Thing.
Yeah, really are.
And it's all bloody and disgusting and gross, and it's just great. It's a lot of fun, you know? It's just wonderful watching people die. Although, I am still mad about this movie.
Okay.
You take it away with this story.
So, we were watching the movie, and the girl has like these...
Semi-spoiler, by the way.
Yeah, the girl has these two brother characters, right? And they're escaping the movie theater. The Blob's chasing them. They escape into the sewers, and the entire time's like, oh, don't kill the kid, and then they escape, and John's like, oh my gosh, thank goodness. And I'm just sitting there with like a oh no sort of smile. I was like oh man, John, you don't just wait. And then one of the kids falls into the sewer, gets nabbed by the Blob, does a sort of, I don't know, Friday the 13th ending where the boy jumps out of the water.
And then I angrily paused the movie.
And then he angrily paused the movie, went to the bathroom, and had a tantrum.
You don't kill a kid! I'm sorry! Okay. Frankenstein.
I had a list. Not Band of Brothers. A Bridge Too Far. Schindler's List.
Shut up. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
The Boy in the Striped. That's another one I did think of.
Okay, so anyway, but just in the way that we see this kid die, I just was just like, fuck this movie.
Yeah.
I was just so pissed off. I didn't like seeing that. Because I don't want to see that.
So the teenagers are okay to see die.
Yeah, but little kids, no. Well, because I also think of me as a kid potentially watching, even though I didn't watch this movie as a kid. I think
you should have watched this movie as a kid because it would have absolutely scarred you.
Yeah, I would have liked to have watched it as a kid.
Every kid needs a little bit of scarring. I got scarred by Ultraman.
Yeah.
You need to have gotten
Pinocchio.
Scarred by 80s Blob.
80s Blob would be pretty cool. There were a lot of movies I watched that I was scared of when I was a kid.
Yeah. And it's always the dumbest stuff, too.
I don't really think that's true. There was some legitimate stuff.
I know most of the movies that scared me as a kid were pretty stupid.
Yeah, well, you watch old monster movies.
Yeah.
But overall, the effects are still really solid, and they're at least worth a few little YouTube searches, and then you watch the full movie to see the full extent of how great these effects are. Because these effects, again, they're up there with John Carpenter's The Thing. Like, they're really good. And let's talk about the acting between both versions. I mean,
one of these things is not like the other.
Yeah, so the original... So, listen, Steve McQueen is pretty decent in the original movie. But everyone else in that movie are pretty subpar.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay.
A lot of it just kind of like gets by. I think a lot of the teenagers were not great, but I think, like, off the top of my head, I think the sheriffs were like fine. One of them might have been like a little overacted. The doctor was fine. Like, yeah, it's just fine.
It's subpar pretty much. Steve McQueen's in it. You would never guess that Steve McQueen would turn out to be a famous actor if you watched this movie.
Judging by this movie.
But then, like 2 years later, he passed on. I forget his name, but Jack H. Harris was the producer of this movie, and he also produced Dinosaurus. And he offered Steve McQueen the main role in Dinosaurus, and Steve McQueen said no because
I don't think he would have fit Dinosaurus.
Instead, he decided to do this one like minor film called The Great Escape.
Oh, that movie sucks. It's too long. It's like 2 hours.
That movie is great.
That movie would only be good if it had the creator of Jurassic Park in it. That's the only way it would be good.
Michael Crichton?
No.
John Hammond?
John Hammond.
He is in that movie.
That's the only way that it would be good.
He is in that movie.
And maybe if you had the main guy from Once Upon a Time in the West, or
he is in that movie. Dude, you like that movie?
Yeah, I like a Great Escape.
It has the movie "Great" in the title. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, but the remake Blob has much better acting.
Cast, yeah.
Better cast. The main girl, she was in a bunch of the Saw movies, if you told me. And
I don't think the main guy was in much.
Yeah. One of the actors is who played the sheriff, very minor role in the movie, but he has a bunch of roles in a bunch of Frank Darabont's movies. And Frank Darabont is the director of movies like The Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, The Mist, The Majestic, all those. Yeah. And he co-wrote this movie.
Oh, the sheriff. Okay. This whole time, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm picturing the guy with the mustache. I'm like, that's not the sheriff. Now I remember the sheriff, and I don't remember him because he dies like almost immediately.
Yeah, he dies pretty quickly.
Yeah. And it's an off-camera death, too.
Well, no, you see him decompose inside.
Yeah, you see him in the slime, but you don't like see the actual death. Like he leaves his office, and then we find his dead body essentially later. I won't spoil how.
I just want to say that when I was a kid, that was the only scene from the movie I saw.
Yeah, the phone booth scene.
And that was like too much for me. I actually thought it was from later in the movie.
No, it's pretty
because
early.
Because when you watch it just out of context, you think it's from like a rampage scene.
No, and that's kind of, I don't know. That's kind of one of the things that I prefer about this movie is the fact that you don't just have like that one long rampage scene at the very end of the movie. You kind of got like the monster is pretty much a threat through the whole thing, and he's got like sporadic appearances.
Yeah, it is pretty good. It's good.
You never know when he's going to show up. Now, I will give the original Blob some credit. They do have the Blob appear pretty early, but then he's kind of out of the film for quite some time. The big slime blob needs to be in the film just a little bit more in the original one. Just a little scene where it eats a guy.
Yeah.
Just somewhere in the middle.
Something I do appreciate, though, is that in both movies, the blob gets bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. But in this movie, the blob turns more into like this like tentacly squid thing towards the end. It's pretty cool.
It's very interesting the way that they kind of like differentiate the blob in this, because in the original, it's very much a slime.
It just stays as like this giant like bubble.
Yeah, whereas
that rolls around.
Whereas in this, it's very in the 80s one, it's very goopy. It's like, I don't know. There's one scene where it's like you see this like one part spit out of another part, and it's like, ooh, what was that?
Yeah, it reminds me of The Thing.
Yeah, it's very The Thing sort of. It's just I don't know, like design, but it's like not even much of a design, because it still is like that weird sort of just purple gelatin mass, but it's still got like it'll like spray out tentacles and all sorts of crazy stuff.
All right. Well, I think we're reaching our final thoughts. What are your final thoughts on 1958's The Blob?
It's a fine enough 50s monster movie. Everybody like, oh my gosh, I love The Blob. I think it's a little overrated. I just think it's a standard 50s monster movie. If I was going to recommend somebody a 50s monster movie, I'd say like Them with the giant claw. But like
Giant Claw, that was our first episode.
Yeah, but The Blob is just kind of like,
Can you believe that was a year ago?
Yeah, that was a while ago. Decades ago, eons ago.
Yeah, think of all the movies we've seen since then. All 19 of them.
Now 21.
Yeah. Wow. Quite the thing. So what rating would you give 1958's The Blob?
I don't know. It's somewhere. It's like bouncing between 6 and a 7. I think I'd probably go more 6.
Okay.
Because it's like, yeah.
Well, listen, I always liked the 1958 Blob movie. I think it has a lot of charm, though I do think it is pretty flawed, and I do think it can be pretty slow at times. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10, personally.
I was, bouncing between 6 and 7.
Because I do think it's a fine movie. You know, I don't think...
No, it's not a bad 50s monster movie. It's not like the worst thing ever. It's just... There are a lot of 50s monster movies, and it just kind of gets blended in with the mess.
And there are also a lot worse 50s
there
monster
are worse.
movies.
We've reviewed worse. Even something relatively mediocre like The Monster That Challenged the World. I would still prefer to watch The Blob over that.
Or The Land Unknown.
Well, okay, that's like
that
saying...
movie sucks.
That's like comparing, a Sonic hamburger to a dead raccoon, I guess I'll take the Sonic hamburger.
I mean, I think the Sonic hamburger is still made out of a dead raccoon.
Alright, that's it. You're gonna be forced to eat Sonic hamburgers now.
I actually like Sonic.
I like Sonic too. Alright.
I had Sonic before we watched the movies.
I like Sonic!
Sorry, I was just making a joke.
Get your jokes out of here. So insensitive. Alright, 80s Blob thoughts.
Now, what are your thoughts on 80s Blob?
9 out of 10. It really is just a solid 50s 80s 50s monster movie remake, and like of the 70s and 80s 50s monster movie remakes, it's one of my favorites. I think my favorite is probably Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but this might be a close second, surpassing The Thing, just because I think that the characters are better in this, and there's a lot of like just good setups and payoffs in this,
and effects.
I mean,
would you say
Thing's
it's
got good effects too?
Would you say it's the most underrated out of all of them?
By far, yeah,
because it really doesn't get talked about.
Yeah, because I mean, like the only other thing is like The Fly.
Yeah,
and I'm not a big fan of The Fly.
All right, I'm gonna give the remake an 8 out of 10 personally.
Yeah, he dropped it, 2 points because of the kid dying.
I'm sorry, that's still stupid. I'm still not happy about that.
It's to keep the tension so that you never know who might die, and it worked. Like while John was watching the film, by the way, he was like on the edge of his seat the entire time, thinking like, "Oh my gosh, they're gonna kill her. She's the final girl. They can't kill her." So, it worked. It worked, ladies and gentlemen.
So yeah. Anyway, The Blob is a good movie. Both of them.
Yeah, sure. No.
Yeah. So, all right. So, next time, we're going to be watching one of Connor's most hated movies ever. And it's a lot of people's favorite Godzilla movies ever.
Happy birthday, Godzilla. Well, late birthday.
Godzilla is 70 years old. I'm 70 years old. I remember just like it was yesterday that it was the 60th anniversary of Godzilla.
I remember when it was 50th. I've got all my 50th anniversary DVDs.
Weren't you born in like 2003?
Yes, so I was alive. Celebrating 50 years of Godzilla. Collect them all.
You really have a bunch of 50th anniversary memorabilia?
Well, I have all the 50th anniversary DVDs.
Oh, that's nice.
From that whole line, I've got all of them.
I like the Sony releases.
Yeah, the Sony releases.
Awesome. Yeah. I remember like it was just yesterday. It was 2014.
Yeah, 2014 was 60th. I remember,
And
65th was like not that long
And
ago.
then you had like
no
both
one's
the years
saying-
you had like a Legendary Pictures Godzilla
Yeah.
movie. One was good, and the other one I didn't like.
Yeah.
It-
Did you even watch Godzilla X Kong?
I still haven't seen Godzilla. X
That's
Kong.
his 70th anniversary movie.
Godzilla -1.
No, that
is-
was last year.
I'm gonna stick
Godzilla
with
X Kong
that
came
one.
out
I'm
this
sticking
year.
with Godzilla -1 because that one won an Academy
That's
Award.
the funny thing, is that all of the anniversary years have had legendary films and not the Japanese ones.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that, Toho? I actually
Come
heard
on.
there was some like weird thing where it's like some weird agreement they can't release a movie the same year.
Yeah. It's that's why you got the anime films, because they're like, ooh, this is our loophole, is we're gonna do animated movies.
But the anime ones suck.
You haven't seen them, have you?
No.
Yeah, you haven't seen them, so you can't have your opinion.
But I've heard that they are not very
They're
good.
really good.
Okay, so what's the movie?
Oh yeah,
Well,
we're gonna talk about
Godzilla versus the Destroyer!
Yeah, it's gonna suck. See you then, everybody.
I always liked that one.
We're talking about the Blob, man.
Alright, well, that's about it. You have anything else to say to the
No.
audience? Okay, well, goodbye.
Hey, this is Wolfman Jack, and It Came from the DVD Collection was hosted and produced by John Billinger and Connor Keating. The movie covered The Blob, and The Blob is the property of Jack H. Harris Productions. This has been a Tiger Media Net presentation. Ow!